This week on Snark Squad Pod, we are joined by Sari Riley to discuss the first season of the Netflix cartoon, The Dragon Prince. And welcome back to Snark Squad Pod. I am your host, Nicole Sweeney, and with me, as always, is my co-host.
Hi, everyone. It's Maddie Nis, and we are joined by dear friend of the pod, Sari.
Hello, I'm Sari. I work at Complexly and do a script editing for them for mostly SciShow. I'm an editorial assistant for Monstrous, and I'm on SciShow Tangents, which is a podcast that I can now talk about for the first time and ever.
We've asked Sari to join us again this episode because she is our go-to cartoon person. We love to talk about animated things with Sari, and we're talking about The Dragon Prince this week. So The Dragon Prince is a Netflix series or a show that follows, it's in this land called Zadia, and there are humans and elves here, and there's different forms of magic, like elemental magic, but then like some dude pretty much invents dark magic, and he kills the Dragon Prince, which kind of protects the two, like, humans versus elves, and it creates this like long-standing war between the two. So we join like current day, and we meet the two human princes, Ezrin and Callum, and then we meet the other side of this, which is a Moonshadow elf assassin, and her name is Rayla, and she's having a hard time accepting like being an assassin. So when it comes down to it, and she's supposed to kill one of the human guards, she lets him go, and so the king and everybody in the castle finds out that there is like an assassination attempt going to happen like that night. And through a series of events, the little princes find out that the dragon egg of the Dragon King was never really killed. Like, it's in the like big villain, the dark magic guy, stole it and has it. So they take it back, and they come across Rayla, and they are like, hey, we've got this egg, and she thinks that maybe it's her duty or like her way to kind of get out of this whole mess that she's in, to bring the dragon egg back to its mom. So Callum, Ezrin, and Rayla embark on this journey to return the dragon egg, the Dragon Prince, and I don't know, they go on like little mini adventures along the way, and they never really make it to return the dragon egg, but the dragon egg does hatch, and it's the cutest little baby dragon in the whole wide world. And that's where we end the first
season. Yeah. So with that, we're going to start where we always start. Sari, did you like this?
I did. I was skeptical heading into it. I think the first couple episodes, especially starting out with an info dump about the world and the magic systems, was like a little bit nerve-wracking for me, where I was just, or I don't even know if it was nerve-wracking. It was just like, I don't like this right now. Yes. Started out with a solid like, oh man, well, I committed to watching the whole season, but I'm not super invested. And the animation style was a little hard for me to get into at first. Like, I thought action sequences looked really good, but movement wise, it wasn't as fluid as I'm used to seeing cartoons. And so that was like a hiccup to my eyes too. So it was like a hiccup to my brain, which is the plot dump, a hiccup to my eyes, which was, I don't know, the animation style. But by episode like 4 or 5, I was invested. And so I would watch a second season. I want to know what happens to these kids. And I think that means I liked it.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good measure. You continue to be invested in the lives of these fictional children.
Mm-hmm. I think for me, there was so much hype kind of coming out around this because it's from, I should have mentioned, it's from the writers, or at least one of the writers who did Avatar: The Last Airbender, which is one of my favorite things on TV ever, and probably one of my would be on my best TV list kind of thing. So I was like,
the
okay.
voice of Sokka is back as Callum.
Right. And the same guy who voiced Sokka. And that threw me off completely. I don't know. Yeah. It was not a good thing to have him there. Not that he's not talented, but it was the exact same voice. And I don't know. From the beginning.
And then you expect this character to be Sokka.
Right. And he's not.
They make him jokey too. So they throw in Sokka like jokes sometimes. I don't know.
Like he's clearly not. Yeah, but he also clearly has some fundamental differences with Sokka as a character.
Yes.
I totally feel you on that being not a great choice.
I didn't think so. So again, just like Sari was saying, like from out of the gate, it was like one thing after the other that I kept tripping over. So the voice was there, and I thought it was very info dumpy. It wasn't Avatar: The Last Airbender, which is like a point against it.
Its greatest crime was not being a different show.
Right. And I don't know. I just ended kind of ambivalent over it. But hearing Sari say, like, I would watch season 2 mostly because I loved Ezrin and I loved the baby dragon, and Bait was great as well. Like, there were elements of it that I was like, that's not bad. But overall, like, I don't know, shoulder shrug, like, C+, I don't know.
Yeah. That was basically how I felt as well. So I watched it twice. We were going to record this episode a week ago, and then we pushed it back. And I don't know, because this show is so short and because I finished it so deeply ambivalent, I was like, I honestly don't even know what I'm going to say. What are my, like, what are my opinions on this show? So I've now watched it twice. I rewatched it last night, or half. I loosely rewatched it. It was on and I was in the room. So I don't know. But the first time that I watched it, that beginning sequence, I rewound it like 3 times because I was like, this is a lot of information that you're asking me to digest. And I don't know how important any of it is going to be. And it wasn't like an Avatar thing where they repeated that information over and over again. So like, I was like, this is the one time that you're giving me all of this information. And I don't know, does it all matter? I probably didn't need to keep rewinding it to make sure that I took in all of that information. And some of that is me too, that like, this is not something that I would have watched, period, had it not been for the podcast. And so part of me kind of went into this wanting to be able to like half watch it. Like the way that I watched it last night is how I would have watched it if I didn't have to talk about it. So just, like doing other things and like, oh, it's on in the background and whatever. And that experience was much, much better. I finished the first experience deeply ambivalent. Because there just wasn't that much there. I was also put off by the info dump. I found a really hard time like caring about anything, and then it was over. Like I got to the end and I was like, oh, I would watch another episode now, but there isn't another episode. And so now my feeling is kind of shrug. On second watch, and I joked last night that I'm prepared to be the Sam of this podcast, as Sam is to A Song of Ice and Fire. Look, if you just devote a few more hours of your life, this is a much more reasonable ask because this is only like 3 hours of your life, not 50. And actually more, because with The Song of Ice, like 50 per book. Anyway. The second time through, I enjoyed it a lot more. I noticed that there were more things that were seeded, like little, just like throwaway little bits, but it was definitely very thoughtful through and through. And that I appreciate. And my biggest takeaway with this is that I think that the way that we discussed Avatar was the correct way to do that. Like, I think you have to take that show in as a whole. It like dragged my feet on it. I was not happy about having to watch 3 seasons of a cartoon for a podcast episode, but ultimately that was the correct way to do it. And I think it's hard for me to know how I feel about this show. I am absolutely going to keep, whether we do more podcast episodes about it, I don't know. I'm sure that I will continue watching this show, but I don't think, like, it's hard to know how I feel about it having only seen these 9 episodes.
The whole like thing, how we should watch Avatar, was probably the closest that you and I ever got into an argument about the podcast. It ended with like, no, you decide. No, you decide. So it wasn't really an argument, but yes, I think there's something about like the pacing and just it being just 9 episodes. And I think it's really interesting how much they laid out, because now, I mean, they front loaded it. We have so much world already. We have all of these little different pieces of like the conflicts and generations of it too, because you have like the big bad, the dark magic user, but then he has 2 like older children who are going after the prince. Then you have the young princes. Then you have all the elves. Like there's layers here to the conflict, and I thought that was really interesting, but we just didn't get enough of it here. We got mostly all of the setup and some of like learning who the characters are. So if this had been like a full complete series, I'm sure we would have had much more to say about it, but it's just kind of like, yeah, they started a thing. Cool.
Right.
Yeah, like I'm ready for them to go on an adventure now. I have a couple seeds of little mysteries that they've probably planted, like what happened to the king? Is he a bird now? Probably. So like there are things like that I'm waiting to have resolved. Or they set up the mirror as a mystery. Like what would scare a moon elf so much in a mirror that we need to have resolved? But the overall arc is going to be these kids traveling to the Eastern Kingdom and confronting that and then saving the world altogether in some way.
All together too, because those kids are not gonna, the older kids are not gonna kill the little, like we begin 100%, with him like helping the step prince flirt with his sister. He's not gonna fucking kill them.
He better not, is what I'm saying.
What I'm saying is I will feel very betrayed.
Callum has to learn more magic somehow. He destroyed his sphere, and perfect mentor is the girl he has a crush on, or something. I don't know. They need to resolve a lot of stuff. I have the endpoint in the same way that when you start watching Avatar, like you have a vague endpoint of like, okay, Aang is going to save the world. That's what they've built up to. That's what they say in the intro. That's what Katara believes, and so I believe it too.
Katara tells you every episode. Where we're going.
World.
And so I think for this show, a lot of its strengths or weaknesses will come out in how the story builds to that point. And right now we don't have that in just the first season. We have the world set up for us, and it could go, I could either love it or I could hate it based on how they make it to that end point and how creatively they do it and how the characters develop over the course of the series.
There were some sort of like withholding of information threads in this season. That was also part of why I finished it and was like kind of ambivalent about it, because I just he loses the paper and only the paper from his from his dad, like that kind of stuff. I don't like it. I hate it. I find it so frustrating and annoying. There's obviously a fair amount of contrivance baked into the story. That's just you got to move the plot along somehow, and every now and then you kind of fudge some things. That is a bit of contrivance that I am not forgiving about. Just like, oh yes, of course, the fucking paper flutters away, and like that's the thing he doesn't have. So I don't know. I hope we get to a place of resolution on that quickly. I don't think we will, but that annoyed me.
I think one piece where it's withholding information, but it worked for me, which is strange. But it's like the 2 older kids. I can't remember their names. Claudia and I don't remember her brother's name. But so their evil dad visits each of them and basically tells the other like kill the prince. Tells the guy, kill the princes, and tells the girl the same thing, but also like if they have to kill each other, basically do that too. And so they're withholding this from each other, but they keep like referencing that their dad told them secrets. So seeing them kind of struggle with that and then keep going. But they're also having like a grand old time being brother and sister on the road. So every time I saw them together, I was like, oh no, like talk to each other. Definitely don't kill each other, and definitely don't kill the princes. Like that's my
priorities in that order.
Yep.
Mari, I'm curious because you said you really liked Ezrin. I feel like his reveal, I want to know more about him, but overall I was unimpressed by his character throughout the whole season. And I almost thought like the talking to animals thing was just kind of thrown in there at the end. I was like, okay, I kind of care about him because he's the sweet kid. He's clearly really empathetic. I guess he was talking to the dragon inside the egg, and so that clue was dropped. But he almost seemed like a catch-all character for me.
Yeah.
Like, just, he is a side hero, but the story cares about Callum right now. So why did you like him so much?
I think that same feeling that you had about Ezran, I just don't feel like any of the characters were well developed. I was put off against Callum in the beginning because of the voice, but I feel the same way about him. Like, he's just kind of a catch-all for the awkward guy who's more artsy than, you know, they all had their tropes or whatnot. I thought Ezran was just cuter. And
yes,
also
true.
He's very like sensitive and sweet, and he's carrying around this egg. And there were other little moments, I think, that they tried to drop in about the talking to animals things that I didn't realize. But so they find like basically a vet in one of the towns to see if he can tell them what's wrong with the egg. And Ezran runs in and sees a horse, and he gives him a big hug, and he says something like, "Oh, you saw something really scary, didn't you?" And the vet's like, "He did. Like, how'd you know?" So there were like things in there that I'm sure that if you go back, you can see that he's like talking more to the animals and, you know, doing all of that. So it wasn't super clear in a way that most people may have noticed or was satisfying, but they tried. And that's how I feel like about all of these characters. Like, they tried, and maybe we'll get more development later on. I just thought Ezran was super cute.
Yeah, he's the one I wanted to like the most, but I think I had the hardest time because everyone was a little bit underdeveloped. I was like, please, just let me love this boy.
One of the things that I really enjoyed, and it's exemplified in Callum and Ezran, is that they had like little bits of like diversity just very casually dropped in without calling too much attention to it. And so Callum is actually a step prince, and so they come from a mixed family in terms of like stepbrother, and then also they seem like a mixed Ezran,
they're coded racially, yes.
Race, yes. And then so they have also an aunt who signs, and she's the general of the army, and she just communicates through sign, and it's just completely casually like, hey, this is, you know, the aunt, and that's it. Like, it wasn't a big deal in terms of like making it a big deal. It just existed in this world, and I thought that was fantastic. And it was one of the reasons that my heart went out to these two little boys immediately, even though they weren't fully developed, because, you know, Callum's dealing with the whole step prince thing, but Ezran clearly loves him a whole lot, and they've got their little inside jokes and everything. So I thought that was really sweet.
Yeah, they're the seeds of some very strong and good sibling feels, both in them and in the evil guys' kids as well. But yeah, it's not quite all there now, but I have hope for where we're going.
How did you feel about, and I can't even remember his name, but the big like black magic guy? How did you feel about him as, I think, the main villain?
I am frustrated by it, because the fact that they included that whole bit with him and Claudia where it's like, I'm going to go do, you know, the thing I should have done all along. And I don't know, that had hints of some anti-hero shit that I really don't care for. And I don't know, and maybe I'm like misreading where they're going with it, but the way that whole episode played out, there were some things about it that I was just like, either you're going so hard on the misdirection as to make it vaguely nonsensical, or you're planting seeds of, see, he turned evil because his friend was mean to him. Like, I don't know. I just, either way you spin that, I'm not a huge fan of that. But I think the idea of him being the big villain and his kids ultimately having to make the choice, a choice in which there's like doing the right thing on one side and their father on the other. I think that is potentially very interesting. So I don't know, mixed bag, like much of this show.
He almost started out as kind of morally gray. I got those seeds too, especially when Claudia was pointing out the picture of him. It was like, you look so happy with the king when you were both youthful and like, I don't know, like this time you were both friends and like you trusted each other to rule hand in hand. Mm-hmm. And then he just was evil. Like, I saw nothing redeeming in him whatsoever. He like eats butterflies as his morning coffee. Straight up evil. He's mean to he's like torturing
he eats
Amuno.
Butterflies is like, you're right, but that's like a way to code. No, this guy's fucking evil. He eats butterflies.
Yeah. Especially as like a children's cartoon, what's the meanest thing you can think of? These rainbow butterflies he nurtures just to eat in the morning. And has like very clearly very dark magic. And I know they had to build up the conflict for the sake of this show and finally have the king put his foot down. But it's like, this guy's really evil, and he's not very secretive about how evil he is. So if like you were concerned about dark magic, put your foot down a little bit earlier, maybe.
Right.
It's not like, he's like a dungeon, an evil dungeon. And like, I don't know. So I guess all that to say, he just feels like a normal big bad to me. Like, like dark magic, even in the intro, was framed as
this
human
is what broke
greed.
The world.
This is what broke the world, was human greed and consuming the life force of other beings for power. And that's what this guy embodies. And so it makes sense that he's the villain in a story where everything's like, all the kids, especially the princes and the dragon prince and their new friend group, are all about bringing the world together and all about bringing life into the world and all about growing up to be this like new generation. And the villain is consumption embodied. So I think he fits for the themes of the story, but I'm uninterested in him as a character.
I think that I too was kind of confused at the beginning whether they were trying to make him sympathetic at all, and then he does go like full dark pretty quickly there. But I don't know. There's still some things like I'm guessing that he didn't kill the King Harrow. I think he is the bird, and so things like that. He didn't kill the egg. He kind of kept it around. I wonder how they're going to play those things out at the end, because there is a portion of him, Viren, I think his name is, that he's like doing this. He thinks he's right in some regards, right? Like he thinks he's protecting the kingdom, and that's his whole spiel. And he thinks he's using magic because, everybody else gets some and not the humans. Like this is the way that they can protect themselves. So I want him to be full dark because I don't want to like excuse him at all, but I'm wondering if the show is going to like lead in that direction.
I agree with that assessment wholeheartedly. That to me is an open question. And I also agree in terms of the way I would personally like to see that go down. But I think it remains still very much an open question.
Sari, you said something really interesting about like the themes and especially the kids like bringing life and all of that. And I think one of my favorite things about this whole thing was kind of that divide between the kids and the adults, because there is like heavy prejudice against like the elves and the humans. So seeing them kind of have to deal with that, and the constantly being like, but you're an elf. And she's like, and, like heading off the stereotypes and everything, I think is really interesting, especially because it's been like 100 years of ongoing war. And so trying to bridge that gap and doing it at the level of the children. In the Discord yesterday, the SnarkSquad Discord, we were talking about how cool teenagers are. Just it's very out of context, but just kind of like that idea that like the people, who are coming up after you, like will change things that maybe your generation didn't get to, or will understand things that you didn't get to. Right. So seeing that kind of play out in the story was really one of the better aspects for me.
I think that's the reason I liked Rayla. I think you were set up to like her because she's this badass warrior and comes out fighting.
She's so cool.
She's so cool.
And she's just like, yep, I'm going to let my hand fall off because it's the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Damn. Look at those principles. And she has the same insecurities of like, oh yeah, I can do everything. And then at the big moment I choke. It's like, yeah, Rayla, I feel that. But also I thought a reason why I was drawn to her almost immediately was because she was one of the children who made an obvious choice really quickly to change the way that her I don't know, the adults in her life were behaving. Whereas like the princes, I feel like they built to that point, and Ezrin was doing all his exploring behind the scenes and eating jelly tarts. He was on his own, doing his own thing. He's great. But I think Rayla really cemented the idea that the kids were going to change the way that the world worked, because she was immediately like, no, I'm not going to kill this human guard man because I feel morally conflicted about it. And then she's the one who decides, with all of her badass skills, to go invade the castle and has the ability and the skills and the knowledge to know what to do with the egg, and is kind of shepherding these princes on their own journey, which, like, also classic, take a competent female character and be like, okay, let's go on an adventure. Let me help you with your problems.
Let me be the most competent so you can be the chosen one.
Yeah. Let me fight all your battles for you and like get you out of all these situations, give you food, so you guys can carry out your destiny.
I mean, the chosen one is the adorable baby dragon.
True.
So, I'm okay with it in this case.
Yeah.
I thought that they were also kind of pointing in the direction of Ezrin being some sort of chosen one, at least in terms of like being the one who was, I don't know, with the baby dragon. So the dragon prince is going to be ultimately the one that does something, but I'll be curious to see where each of their stories like land, and if there's one that kind of comes out more prominent than the other.
My thought was Callum, actually, as to that end of feeling like they were seeding the idea of like the princes being chosen, because just like the fact that he was the like step prince, I don't know, like that was for the first few episodes. I was wondering whether there was something else going on there, like some sort of magical component or something. That was, I don't know, the impression that I got at the beginning.
I feel like I still have that sense almost, because we know who his mother is, like the queen, badass warrior who loves jelly tarts. She's great. I know two things about her, and she has a statue.
She's a badass warrior queen who loved jelly tarts.
Yeah, which goals?
What else do you need?
But we don't know anything about his dad, and I almost felt like that would have been the content of the king's note. Was like, oh, by the way, here's the deep, dark secrets about your past that you should know. I've adopted, like, I trust you as my son, but like, here's all the things that you don't know and that I would have told you had
he's totally half elf.
Yeah.
He's half
like elf. He has to be something magical. And so I think that'll be a really interesting divide, because everyone, I guess Rayla is pure moon elf, but everything, and the dragon is dragon. He's a pretty solid dragon.
100% dragon.
But both the human kids feel like Ezrin might just be mixed race, but like caught between two worlds almost, which could play out in interesting ways when it comes to who's going to rule the world in this new peaceful existence. Or are they all going to like have a court together or something like that? I don't know where I was going with that exactly, but I just want +1 to Callum being mysterious past, maybe something important.
Question mark.
Yeah.
There was a lot of very good dialogue in this show, I will say. That was like a thing that kept me going. There were just some really delightful little bits of, like, I don't know, dialogue and fun gags. When the bad guy, the bad guy mage tells the king that he's like, when he first proposes his plan with the snake, he's like, and he like sweeps his arm and he's like, any one of these guards would die for you. And then there's like a quick shot of them all like side-eyeing each other. It's so good.
I had a lot of those moments as well, where I thought that some of the charm in this was in those like throwaway things and some of the looks and jokes that passed between all of them. So with children's or like cartoons or children's television like that, you have to find the balance of like dark and like humor. And I think Avatar did a really great job of that and showing us like everything that was at stake, and there were big stakes, but also keeping it like friendly and like colorful and playful and whatnot. And I think this has a good beginning of that. Again, half a story here at this point, but I just loved some of those like little interactions and like the capturing their facial expressions and the way that they joked with each other. And I think that it was some of my favorite animation there. I too noticed the animation and I had a problem, but mostly with like the talking of it, like the way, I don't know, it was kind of like weird and jumpy when the characters were talking if you focus too much on them. But all of like the facial expressions and stuff that were happening kind of on the side, that stuff was fun.
Yeah, it felt like whoever drew this and whoever storyboarded it had a really strong sense of how to make a cartoon feel cinematic is not the right word, but something like that. Like sort of how I've heard comic artists discussing it or things like that, where you have to treat an animated scene like a scene in a movie. And so you want your background characters to be involved. You want every single person to be acting. And so you're drawing it, but you're still acting for these characters. And I thought it had a really good sense of that. Even though, yeah, if you paid too close attention to the dialogue, it was a little, I don't know, something with the frame rate is the best way to describe it. I don't know anything about video, really. I know a little bit. But I thought the action scenes looked super, super smooth. Like whatever they chose to do for their animation style or techniques, I really liked all the, like Rayla, whenever she had to do something, was running up walls. That looked so cool. During the whole fight with the leech. Yeah, it was so smooth, so clean. And when they were fighting the leech and running around, like jumping on the back of that big wolf and it was running around and barking, or using all the magic, that always looked really cool. So I don't know enough. I should have done research about what they did technically to animate it, but whatever they did was suited for motion, I think, and was suited for these big splashy moments where like the strength of the writing carried the dialogue, but that was less visually. I guess the strength of the dialogue carried the talking moments, but the hiccupy animation almost like pulled me out of it at some points. But in the action scenes, everything was like tight and good, and I was the most engaged I was in the show.
I love the colors of everything too. Like it was just really pleasant to look at. And I almost like to like mention like the hiccupy animation. It sucks because some of it was really good, but then they would just kind of like focus in on people talking. And I was like, wow, what are you doing there? But thankfully, the dialogue was often enjoyable and I think super cute. And I think it endeared me to the characters in a way that we needed because there wasn't a lot of development there.
Mm-hmm. I just got distracted because when Sarah mentioned the frame rate thing, I was like, yes, I did notice that too. When you guys were first talking about the animation, I was like, I don't know, whatever. But as soon as you said the frame rate thing, I was like, yes, I do remember having that thought as well. And so I was like trying to see if I could like really quickly pull up some sort of answer. I could not. I found an article that I will read. Maybe I will link it in the blog post if it's actually any good. But it seems like what they did was that like the show was 3D animated and then they slowed it down to give it the appearance of 2D animation.
Weird.
Yes. This is I don't know, my like brief impression that I'm getting. Maybe I'm misreading this in the like, you know, my 15-second perusal of this article. Feel free to at me if I'm wrong. That's fine. But yeah, so a weird that seems like a very weird and bizarre choice. I don't know why they would do that, but I don't know, man.
Yeah, it definitely is a distinctive look. Like, it does not look like other cartoons to me, as someone who watches quite a few of them. And so, like, props to them for trying something different. I have no idea. I guess this is what it looks like if you do 2D animation with a 3D program. And I wonder if anyone else has tried it before or tried it differently. But, shrug.
I also wrote down an angry all caps note when the king tells Callum's like, why don't you just do any number of like do things about it instead of just standing here and waiting to be murdered? And he's like, you're the king, you can do whatever the heck you want. And the dad says, that's how it seems to children, but actually children have all the freedom and power, and like freedom maybe, but they don't have all the fucking power. This is garbage. Don't say this. This is so blatantly not true, and it bothers me so much to be embedding this message as like, and especially like coming from the king, like baking it in there in this way of like, yes, this is definitely the wisdom of your elders that children have all the power. No, that's they don't. Like the degrees to which children occasionally feel powerless is not unfounded. They're not wrong. They're not imagining it. That's true. And like how we help them deal with it, how the adults in their lives can be better to them. That's the conversation to be having. It's not to tell them that they just don't understand how No, I hate it.
It's especially funny there because he's like, you have all the power. Pack up your bags. I'm sending you away. You have no choice in the matter.
Yeah. Right. Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
All this power.
I did think there were some very nice quotes. I guess this is rehashing the dialogue bit a little bit, but when Rayla and Callum were both having their own like existential crises, one was on a tree and one was on top of a hill of just like, they had lost the leech fight and they were feeling really powerless. And the way that they were articulating that was really sweet and heartwarming. I think that was the moment where I was like, oh no, I care about these kids.
You got me.
Yeah, because they're both like experiencing the things that you do when you grow up. Feeling like you're making mistakes or feeling like you're not good enough, and their kids thrown into this really intense battle all of a sudden and on a quest that they didn't necessarily ask for, and reckoning with that. And it's like, I love those moments in shows where kids are allowed to reflect on their own personalities and reflect on their own weaknesses and then grow together as a team, and as a found family, because that's a trope.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
I'm curious as to, we talked about this a little bit, mostly in the context of the initial info dump being off-putting, but what do you think about the world building? Like the East versus West, humans versus elves, the magic system in the world, like the magic items, because we see a little bit, like there's the sun dagger and the moon elf bond and things like that, and the magic mirror and the evil soul-sucking coins.
I am impressed with how much they were able to pack in the way of world building into what was ultimately like a very few episodes. I think they did it like efficiently, in a way, aside from that info dump that I thought was like obnoxious and that I hated. The rest of it, I think they were able to tell us a lot about the world in ways that felt fairly organic. So I don't know, but my feeling about the world building is similar to my feeling about the story, which is that like we just have the beginning. And so it's like very hard for me to say how I feel about it, I think. And especially since Sari pointed this out to me before we were talking about it earlier, but this one was moon, and there's like 7, 8, I don't know. There's a lot of magic systems. So I assume there's going to be more books here than there were in Avatar. So like just given that structure and like the Avatar structure, we'll see. But it seems like we got a whole lot more story to go before I know how I feel about the world or the story. I mean, right now I'm interested, and I think they did a good job of telling us a lot of information in a fairly short space of time.
I was trying to think about it in comparison to Avatar: The Last Airbender. So there were like, you get like the basics of like the different benders or whatnot, and they would introduce new elements of the world and the magic, but I thought that it was in a way that, and again, we're talking about like a full series versus 9 episodes in the beginning of a story. But in Avatar, I thought it was in a way that was like really satisfying, because it was like earthbenders, but think about it, sandbenders, and you had like waterbenders, but then it evolved to like bloodbenders, and like it kept introducing things that was in like directly related to the story and very satisfying. I think when you have something that's like blood magic, you can do anything, and the explanation is like blood magic. So there were a ton of those little things that like were interesting, and you're like, oh, he just sucked his soul into a coin, and you just kind of have to accept it, and it's fine. It adds like a little bit of interest to the world or whatnot, but it's not necessarily as like satisfying as like seeing another piece of the world really evolve through the story. So they just have this like great way to stuff all this thing in there and let the audience have to go like, okay, I guess I have to accept that because it's magic or whatnot. So.
And they haven't actually spelled out the rules of the magic.
Right.
And so, so like because it's magic, they can kind of do whatever they want. And so, but we haven't really been given rules. And so it's just, they're going to do a thing and we have to sort of accept the thing. Unlike, as you said, in Avatar, where they laid out a lot of rules early on. And so then it was just, okay, take this rule that you know, and then here's a fun and interesting thing we can do with it. In this case, like, we don't really know what the rules are yet. So, and we might never. Who knows?
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. I didn't think of it in those words, but I had the similar feeling where it felt like more fun to predict where the different bending styles in Avatar would go, because you know that like water and fire are in opposition, and fire draws power from the sun and water draws power from the moon and things like that. But here, like a sun dagger couldn't break a moon elf's bond. And I was like, okay, this means every magic set, there's super powerful magic in all these different schools, but I have no idea how they relate to each other. And there are a lot of them that we have to learn about all at once. And Callum has this little cube that is identifying magic power around the world. And I feel like they'll rely on that to be like, oh, look, earth power, just to like help keep track of everything, because I don't even know. I couldn't name all the magic systems in the world. I know there's the moon. I know there's the sun, and then there's others. Bait is water, maybe?
Yes, water, earth. I don't know.
Yeah, but shrug. It just feels like they've created such a vast world, and there's magic and unmagic. And that's mostly what I understand right now. It's almost as if they're trying to create like a high fantasy level world, for lack of a better way to describe it, where there's so many details. And if you wanted to, you could have an encyclopedic knowledge of all the nuances of the world and how everything relates to each other. But I really liked how with Avatar: The Last Airbender, they distilled that and created a world very unlike our own, created really strong rules for it. This feels like they're playing into more medieval tropes where there are kingdoms and like armies and a strong divide between magic and not magic, but like the subtleties of all that and the subtleties of all those politics and the different factions within this world are a lot harder to grasp unless you spend a lot of time with it, or unless you pick up the subtle hints that they're dropping and create your own fan wikis and trace everything, which I don't know. That's like some people really, really enjoy that. And I'm sure some people really enjoy picking up those kind of Easter eggs. But
right.
I don't know.
Low fantasy, please. Low.
Yeah. A note that I had made and something that I talked to Nicole about a little bit ago was the fact that Amaya, I think her name was, the aunt,
yes,
who's the general. It was really cool that she signed, and we saw Gren as her translator, and it seems like that was really respectful of the ASL speaking or signing community in the way that he would translate her inflections as well as what words she was saying. And I thought it was really interesting that there were 2 times, I think, when she was signing to the statue of her sister, like I guess the gravestone of her sister, and when she was telling Gren to go on the quest to save she was trusting him essentially to go and find the princes, where there wasn't a translation. And I rewound it. I put on subtitles and there was no translation there. And I had to go online and Google it. And there was some Reddit thread where someone had translated both of those things. And like the speech to her sister was something like, I'm sorry I failed. Like I care about these princes so much and like you deserve better. And I'm trying to uphold your legacy as much as possible. I think something along those lines. And then when she was sending off Gren, it was something like, you've been my voice for so long. So you're the only one I trust with this mission. And it was these very heartfelt, meaningful things. And I thought it was a very interesting choice to not have them be translated. I don't know whether this was intentional or not. This could be me reading way into a children's show that just happened to not be subtitled during these exchanges. But like showing the representation of the deaf, hard of hearing community, but also putting hearing audiences into their perspective for a little bit and not a jarring way, but in a very thoughtful, like they're still interesting. Like you could still get a lot of the emotion of the scene, of both of those scenes, but you just had no idea what she was saying. I just thought that was an interesting choice. And maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm thought too much about it, but it was like, I'm expanding my worldview right now. Like this is not something that I've experienced in media before. Is every piece of media that I've watched or listened to has been catered to like a hearing audience. Yes. And this one, these two scenes are not. And I don't know. It was a good perspective shift.
This is where I would end with my like one other thing that I had to say, but I got nothing. So.
All right. Well, on that heartwarming note, I think we're ready to call it then. Thank you to Sari for joining us and to all of you for listening. If you are enjoying this podcast, we would greatly appreciate it if you considered supporting us on Patreon, where we've got some bonus content, a couple bonus episodes of the podcast already, and polls to vote on future media and hangouts and stuff. You can find out more at patreon.com/SnarkSquad. We would also love to hear all of your thoughts on this episode and on the Dragon Prince. You can find a post dedicated to this episode as well as show notes at SnarkSquad.com, or you can find us on Twitter at @snark_squad. I am at Sweeney Says.
You can find me at My Name is Marines.
I'm at C.E. Riley.
Thank you as always to Steph and Shin for the delightful theme music that is playing us out right now. And we will be back in your podcast feed next week. Bye.
Bye.